The U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen is with us this morning from New Hampshire. Let's go on the record. The Granite State senior senator is often a bridge in Washington's political divide. With the 2024 presidential race ramping up, is the window to getting anything done in Congress closing fast? The senator is here in the chair. Let's go on the record this morning.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Welcome to OTR, everyone. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's political reporter, Sharma Cecchetty. It's great to have you with us. As you can see, New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen is in the chair this morning. She is a Democrat, as you know, taking office as a U.S. Senator in 2009. Also the first woman to serve as governor of New Hampshire from 97 to 03. She also served in the state Senate. She holds degrees from Shippensburg University, which I have learned is in Pennsylvania.
That's correct.
And what they call the University of Mississippi, but what I have called for my whole life, Ole Miss.
Hotty toddy.
Hotty toddy. Way to go. It's great to have you with us. Thank you, Senator.
Nice to be here.
Thank you, Senator.
Let's start with former President Trump. I was there, actually. He was in Manchester, New Hampshire, just a few days ago. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
We're now in a nation, and we are a nation in serious decline, a nation that has lost its way. We're led by a hopeless person, but we will win in 2024 and make America great again.
Well, that was the least of what he had to say about some of his political opponents. But we know he can win a primary in your state. Do you think that's the best he can do?
Well, he certainly didn't win the general election in 2016 or 2020. And I think what he has done since then has further alienated him from a lot of New Hampshire voters, the January 6th insurrection and his refusing to acknowledge the outcome of the election. I don't think it helps him that he paid money to a former porn star, or a current porn star, I guess.
He does have some mounting legal troubles right now.
And he does. But I think fundamentally people disagree with him on the issues that he supported as president and continues to support. New Hampshire believes that women should have our own control over our bodies, that reproductive rights should be decisions of women. Donald Trump doesn't believe that. People in New Hampshire believe that there is a role for America in the world and that Vladimir Putin is a disgraceful tyrant who has entered an unprovoked war against Ukraine. Donald Trump doesn't believe that.
Well, let me ask you about Governor Sununu. He hinted a bit last week about announcing a campaign. You think he'll run?
Well, he says he's going to, but he's not putting together a campaign as you would if you were really serious about running. He's not raising money. He hasn't put together a campaign organization. So I think it remains unclear.
If you rely on polling would suggest that he might not even win New Hampshire if he ran in New Hampshire. So that might be difficult. What about Governor DeSantis?
Well, it's interesting to see people find out more about Governor DeSantis and seem to like him less. I think his fight with Disney is not something that most people who will be players in the presidential race think is a good fight to have. And I certainly disagree with his attacks against teachers, with his plans to ban books. I think that is not in the interest of this country and the education system and our need to compete with the rest of the world.
President Biden officially kicked off his re-election last week. You have been a strong supporter of the president, but you've made it clear that you're not happy with his efforts to end New Hampshire's first in the nation primary status. He finished fifth in New Hampshire in 2020. Why should he keep things as they have been? Why shouldn't there be evolution? Why shouldn't we evolve to...
Well, New Hampshire's been the first primary for over 100 years. We actually were the state that said we think the political bosses shouldn't make all those decisions, that the average voter should be able to weigh in. And I think we have served the presidential selection process very well for that 100 years. And, you know, the president could have had more diversity, which is the reason he gave for wanting to change the current order. He could have moved another state earlier without doing what he did to New Hampshire. And I think it's unfortunate because it has an impact on the independent voters who are very important in New Hampshire and who are going to be very important to any re-election of the next president. And it also has an impact on Democrats up and down the ticket.
Just curious, should we evolve our election process? Should there be primaries leading up to the general election, or should there be a national primary day as there is a national election day?
Well, I think if we were going to design, the political scientist in me says if we were going to design a primary process, we would design something different than what we have. But I think we have a process that voters are very engaged and participating in, and that's the goal. We want people to be excited about what's happening in the election process, and so that's what I'm concerned about. Mm-hmm. I'm concerned about New Hampshire voters who have been very engaged to the extent that, you know, they will go see every candidate on both sides of the aisle for independents and make a decision about who to vote for. And the fact that we would now discount their participation, I think, is unfortunate. And again, I think it has implications for Democrats in the state, hopefully not for the general election, but we don't know that yet.
All right, let's move to reproductive rights. You touched on that just a bit. It's going to be a major issue in 2024. The recent Supreme Court decision to keep the abortion pill mifepristone on the market for now hasn't exactly cooled that debate. You have been critical of New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu on this. He says he's pro-choice. You say the laws he's signed show otherwise. So do you think women in New Hampshire are at risk?
Absolutely. We saw that when he signed a budget that limited access to abortion for the first time in New Hampshire's history. We saw him criminalize abortion providers in a way that was harmful to women. Now, and then we saw him try and take credit for having signed that legislation and then saying, well, I'm the one who changed it. You don't get to take credit for something that you initiated. And he's also described himself as the most anti-abortion governor that New Hampshire has had. So he's tried to have it both ways, and it's the women of the state who are now at risk because of that. And we need to see, you know, despite what the debate on the Republican side, it's very clear. We saw it from the Dobbs decision. We see it now in the case in Texas where they're trying to take away mifepristone. There is a national intent on the part of Republicans to deny women access to reproductive decisions that are critical to women's health.
You think this will backfire on Republicans in 2024?
Oh, I think it already has. We've seen it. We saw it in the 2022 races. We saw it just recently in the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. Whenever this issue has been a campaign issue, women have turned out to say, we do not want to have our rights limited by the governor or the Supreme Court or whoever. These are decisions that are very personal. They should be made by women in consultation with their families, with their healthcare providers, with their faith, whoever. But they should not be decided by a governor or somebody in the United States Senate or somebody on the Supreme Court who has no idea what the circumstances of that woman and her family are.
A showdown over the debt ceiling is looming, and the entire U.S. economy could be put in real danger. Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker, got a bill through the House that has no chance in the Senate. Is that fair to say? No chance in the Senate. The President says he will not negotiate. So how does this, you know, how do we get over the cliff? I guess that's a simple question.
Look, I don't believe the American people want us to default on what we have already spent. It puts at risk mortgage payments and interest rates. It puts at risk 401ks and retirement plans. It puts at risk any veterans who are dependent for health care. You know, when I was governor, I worked really hard to try and maintain the state's bond rating, because I understood that if that got lowered, it was going to have an impact on people's mortgages. It was going to have an impact on our ability to continue to provide the services that people need. And I don't believe the American people want us to default on this country, because they're already dealing with high inflation, they're dealing with economic challenges. It would put the country into a recession in a way that is not going to be good for anybody. So, you know, we need to get this done, and we have lots of time that we can debate the budget. That's what the Republicans want to do. But for them to say, we're going to let the country default on the bills that the money that we've already spent is not an answer.
All right. New Hampshire has some important military bases like Pease National Air Guard Base. The leaked documents case involving a young Massachusetts airman, that has become an international scandal. He had a very high security clearance. I want to ask you, were you shocked to learn about the easy access to some of these top military secrets?
You know, anytime anyone reveals classified information, it is very serious. It puts at risk those sources who are providing information to the United States. It puts at risk our national security. In this case, we're still trying to assess all of the damage that's been done because of what this young man did. So I think we've got to take a look at our whole system and make sure that people who have the kind of background this young man appears to have had don't get that kind of access.
Are you concerned if there's one, there are 101? If there's one Jack Teixeira, there's more than one?
Well, we've seen, you know, from the WikiLeaks scandal,
right.
We've seen this happen 3 times in the last 10 years. So I think we've got to look at our system of classification and who gets access to that. And that is an ongoing investigation that we need to examine very carefully.
And there are concerns about more documents that haven't even surfaced.
Yeah.